Today, I want to take a look at this video right here from Breaking Points, which for those who don't know, Breaking Points, it's a YouTube channel with over 1 million subscribers on YouTube. I want to look at a few moments of this video, not going to look at the whole thing, but a few points jumped out at me. This video has over 187,000 views, and I guess they interviewed Chris Matthews, who I'm no fan of. But let's check it out. Let's check out some of these points that were brought up in this video. Populist left, populist right, coming together to overthrow the establishment. That's what Crystal and Sagar do with their show Breaking Points. Can't trust the corporate establishment mainstream media. I want to be clear about something because I'm definitely going to be reacting more so to Crystal and Sagar, but I do think Chris Matthews comes up short in a lot of ways. Although in some parts he's a lot more grounded in reality than Crystal and Sagar.
But it's not just about where people are, it's where they feel they're going. And so during the pandemic, for example, you know, there were a lot of problems, there was a lot of pain. But you also had a child tax credit that was put in place that...
Child tax credit, or as I like to call it, the birth control tax. Do you use birth control to avoid having kids? Well, you're going to pay more in taxes, as we give tax breaks to those with kids who did not use birth control. Birth control tax.
Genuinely reduced child poverty. You actually had homelessness.
And what does that say if people who are working and trying to raise a family, if their taxes are so high to the point where they struggle to raise a family, where you have to give them tax breaks or credits or whatever? Why not just lower the fucking taxes?
Significantly reduced because you had eviction moratoriums, you had expanded access to healthcare, and you had actually suicides went down.
Why is Trump?
Yeah, a lot of economic fascist policies during COVID that they seem to want to maintain.
Trump running even in Michigan.
Hold on. So it is possible to improve the material condition of Americans. We've seen it throughout American history. We saw it just now in the pandemic when the government wants to deliver. So
yeah, it's possible in the short run if you just violate everyone's rights a little bit. What's the big deal?
So to throw up your hands and say, well, this is just the American condition.
$2 billion.
I don't think that's accurate.
We're running $2 trillion in debt in full employment, which is basically full employment. You can't have more expansive economic policies than that. You can't. You blow the whole thing.
You did, and it worked very well for people.
Yeah, it worked very well. All of the policies during COVID worked very well.
Where?
It worked well for lots of people who had more money in their bank account and where childhood poverty was much lower.
Well,
you know,
when was this? When was this?
During the pandemic.
Yeah, during the pandemic. Everything was great. Wonderful.
And then you also had, you know, let's talk about the FDR era. I mean, we had a New Deal that, you know, built out the...
Which made things a lot worse.
American middle class. This is the era you were growing up in,
I know where you're coming from. Like
lower inequality. So these things are possible. You can't just say, oh, well, this is just how it is.
Spend more money.
Yeah.
Spend more money.
And tax the rich.
Oh, okay. How you
now, this is interesting. Hold on.
How are you going to do that?
You're going to tax the rich.
How do you do that?
The wealthiest among us.
All right. So isn't this interesting? These people seem to think that you can just continue all of these emergency COVID policies forever and ever. Easy. Especially the financial assistance. Easy. And when asked about this, Crystal says, oh, well, we'll just tax the rich. Someone like me may ask, is this the country we really want to live in? I know we're already doing this on a relatively small scale and we're already on our way there, but yeah, sure. Let's live in a world where if you make a nice living for yourself, if you create a lot of wealth for yourself and your family and your loved ones, then your fellow Americans can just waltz along and vote to take all of the money from you that you've earned if they feel like they or someone else needs it more than you do. Is this the kind of place we want to live in?
No, of course not.
It's this bizarre line of thinking that I've noticed lately from a lot of socialist and economic fascist types. They say they want to reduce poverty, but they also seem to want to make it illegal to become rich. Astonishing logic. And even if we think about this on a surface level, I guess American billionaires in America collectively have, at least according to sources like Americans for Tax Fairness, I guess they own roughly $4 to $5 trillion worth of wealth. So what's that? How much can we expect from that? $4 to $5 trillion worth of wealth. I think that's one CARES Act, which I think was roughly $2.2 trillion. And then an American Rescue Plan, which was another $1.8 trillion. That gets you to $4 trillion right there. And will people want to create all of this massive amounts of wealth that the Crystals and Sagars just want to take?
No, of course not.
How can we expect that billionaires and other people will produce the wealth that the Crystals and Sagars, populist left, populist rights, socialist and economic fascists want to take to divvy up? Can we expect people to create that wealth in the future that they want to divvy up? Huh?
Who runs the U.S. Congress? Who runs the U.S. Congress?
And again, as I said, Chris Matthews does not really have much of an answer other than, well, today's Congress won't do it. And they probably won't. I don't think that's a good answer, though.
Wealthy, but isn't that the part of the problem?
So what's your argument?
My argument is
the wealthy shouldn't be wealthy, and the Democrats should be running the Congress.
Well, I guess what's your response, though?
My
are you just saying
argument
this is the American condition? We can't do anything more? Like,
right.
this is stasis.
All I can tell you is we're running at something that's very close to...
Yeah, we can't do anything more. Take all the wealth from all the billionaires in America. And again, that would get you the CARES Act and the American Rescue Plan. Then what?
Rate more inflation. Very close. So what do? You bring up price.
And here's Chris Matthews, to his credit, is reality oriented enough to where he acknowledges, like, yeah, if you just spend at deficits and add all of this new money to the economy, there's going to be undesirable consequences like inflation.
Do anything more? Like,
right.
this is stasis.
All I can tell you is we're running at
up?
something that's very close to rate more inflation. Very close. So what do? You bring up prices. Look, demand pull. The more money you spend, the more prices go up. Right? Do we agree on that?
Yeah.
No, I actually don't fully agree.
Yeah, so it looks like Crystal Ball does not agree with this. That more government spending, deficit spending, leads to higher prices.
On that, because part of what we saw coming out of the pandemic, the argument was, oh, it's just because of all the big government spending, because God forbid we give working class people a little bit of money in their pockets. At the same time, increasingly we've seen a lot of the price increases.
Who knew you could run an economy on wishful thinking?
Were from corporations who decided they could price gouge and use the excuse of inflation to lift prices significantly. Now, that was seen as a fringe theory at the time when it was first floated, like just a bunch of lefty weirdos that think this.
Because it was a fringe theory. And so, yeah, if your economic agenda does not work the way you like it, just blame corporate greed. And I think Crystal and Sagar, I think they were the first people I reacted to when talking about all the post-COVID inflation. Because there were receipts from them before, around the time of the passage of the American Rescue Plan. They were saying that inflation was not gonna happen. Then when inflation did happen, they predictably blamed corporate greed. And I pointed this out at the time. How does this explain? You just want to blame all the inflation on corporate greed and price increases. How does this explain areas that were hit hardest by inflation, like used car prices, housing prices, and even small businesses were increasing prices? You can't explain that on corporate greed. Furthermore, how would this explain the history of various corporations who managed to increase profits while lowering the prices for their products to expand to larger markets?
We now have increasing evidence that that was a big part of it. We also had, coming out of the pandemic, huge supply chain disruptions that were a real problem, and also the Ukraine war contributed to that significantly. So to just say, oh, they spent money and that's what happened, I think that's a very simplistic understanding of what was going on.
Well,
yeah, very simplistic understanding. Anyway, time for some Monday morning quarterbacking here. So put aside the economics for a second. Because earlier, Crystal said that we would pay for all these wonderful government spending policies by just taxing the rich. And now she's articulating that increased government spending and adding new money to the supply of money That we saw all this added money did not play any role, had no impact on inflation. That's what she thinks. And I'm over here wondering if that's the case. If you can just spend at a deficit and print money with zero consequence, then why bother taxing the rich? Why bother with taxes at all? Other than for maybe punitive reasons like having too much money or wanting to buy products made in other countries. And yes, breaking points from what I've seen, they've been loud cheerleaders for restrictions on international trade, loud cheerleaders for import taxes. But either way, if you can just print money, spend at a deficit with zero consequence, if inflation cannot be blamed on new money or deficit spending, why bother with taxes at all? Just eliminate taxes and print as much money as you want because, hey, there will be no consequences. Anyway, I want to jump to the 29-minute mark now. Let's check this out.
Yeah.
So, the era that
But you can spend more money and not drive up inflation.
The era that you've covered
like 19 minutes later, he's bringing this back up.
Extensively. It's like this Reagan, Clinton, neoliberal consensus.
Oh, no, not neoliberal bootlickers.
Do you think that consensus failed in any meaningful respect? Do you think that consensus is broken? Are we moving?
And I know some people are trying to reclaim the neoliberal label. I did a video where I interviewed one of the self-proclaimed neoliberals, but often when populist types, left and right, whenever they throw this word around, it's essentially some empty smear that ultimately means nothing. And you can tell this. It's they use it as a package deal. To say Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, basically the same. Both neoliberals, I guess.
Moving towards a new era, or do you think that it continues apace?
Well, I don't think moderation sells, generally. I mean, McGovern beat Muskie. I mean, the fact is that if you have a wild idea and you can appeal to people who are desperate, they're going to give you a shot. And the idea that we can continue a massive welfare program in addition to what we're spending now, I don't know how we can keep doing it. There's no way you're going to raise taxes. I can't think of how you can raise taxes with a Republican Congress right now. And in effect, even the Senate's not going to do it.
Right. Yeah, I mean.
So where are you going to do it? What government are you going to have? You're talking about the United States government?
But do you think that there were core failures, to get back to this question of where does the populist energy come from? Around Trump and around Bernie. Where does this come from?
Both Trump and Bernie.
Where does this come from? And is it rooted in some key failures of that bipartisan consensus, the overlap between basically Bill Clinton and Ronald Reagan? You have this you have this consensus in favor of deregulation.
Deregulation.
You have the Iraq War.
Free trade.
You have free trade.
Free trade. They're not big fans of free trade. And you want to talk about, increasing the material well-being of the average American. You want to embrace free trade and not abandon it. And they seem to not be big fans of free trade. And I'm over here wondering why not? Doesn't everyone have the right to freely trade with one another? I guess that's a horrible idea.
Trade. You have all of these things that build up to the financial crash. I mean, aren't these key failures of neoliberalism that...
Yeah, the financial crisis was, I guess deregulation was to blame.
Now you have these movements in reaction to, movements that you very much don't support.
Now, in all fairness, I do think that the financial crisis and the way it was handled did open the door for populist goons like Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump to cash in. There were definitely a lot of bad actors like Bernie Sanders looking for an opportunity to cash in. And again, I think Chris Matthews, I don't think he's really good at handling this topic. But I think we also need to ask, does this make people like Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump right? Does this mean that their ideas and their solutions and alternatives are good alternatives to what led us to the financial crisis? And I would say, Let's think about another incident that happened where you saw two different brands of populism rise up. Back in the 1970s, late 1970s, there was an economic crisis in Iran. And one of the big problems with the economy in Iran during this period leading up to the revolution was high inflation, which just coincidentally, by mere happenstance, just so happened after years of massive government spending and printing money in Iran. Just one big giant coincidence, apparently. And then the inflation was then blamed on greedy businesses.
Oh, you absolutely suck!
Like we see now with Crystal and Sagar trying to scapegoat corporate greed. Now, during the late 70s, the people in Iran, I think, had a lot of legitimate grievances with the Shah and the government of Iran. During this period, it would have been accurate to think of the Shah and the government of Iran as the establishment. And it also would have been accurate to blame them for the country's misery. Now, two populist movements that ultimately tried to cash in on the resentment toward the establishment in late 70s Iran were the Marxists and the Islamic theocrats. And I think a big reason for that was those were just the ideas in the culture. That's what dominated the intellectual landscape. Islam long had a influence on that region of the world, but also before this, for years, the students, the youth in Iran, they were studying abroad, getting influenced by Marxist intellectuals and other reading material and bringing this all back to Iran and sharing it with their friends. All this gobbledygook about a workers' revolution, a revolution of the masses. But yeah, you had the Marxists and you had the Islamic theocrats. Now, does this mean that either of these two populist elements had the right ideas or the right solutions or the proper alternatives to turn Iran around? I think the clear answer to that is in fact, economic conditions in Iran got a lot worse after the revolution. And after the Shah had fled the country and once Ayatollah Khomeini was gaining power in Iran, he started to say stuff like economics is a matter for donkeys and that the people did not rise up to get cheaper melons.
Oh, you absolutely suck!
So yeah, you guys might want to beware of populist rabble-rousers who want to take you on a fun adventure to overthrow the establishment. Because there is a good chance that these same populist knuckleheads will make your life a lot worse and then they will refuse to take responsibility. And I think it's rather rich that they accuse Chris Matthews of a simplistic understanding of economics by merely acknowledging the fact that adding trillions of new dollars and deficit spending leads to inflation. And yet, here they are, Crystal is overstating the deregulation that happened during the neoliberal Clinton years and saying that it essentially caused the financial crisis when it was government intervention in housing in the name of making it easier for the average American to buy a house. It was that sort of stuff that ultimately led to the financial crisis. Policies that I imagine Crystal and Sagar would totally support today if they were tried again. I think this would be like if you developed some sort of lung disease or heart disease after, say, smoking a pack of cigarettes every day for 25 years. And then afterward, people trying to convince you that smoking crack or smoking crystal meth is a healthier alternative to tobacco. So maybe it is useful to talk about how incidents like the financial crisis led to populist movements in politics. I think it's more important to properly diagnose what happened with the financial crisis and also whether or not these populist movements that we're seeing have the right alternatives and the right ideas and the right solutions. Because from what I can tell, They don't.